You're listening to Season 2 of the Mies podcast. I'm your host, Josh Sharkey, the founder and CEO of Mies, a culinary operating system for food professionals. On the show, we're going to talk to high performers in the food business, everything from chefs to CEOs, technologists, writers, investors, and more, about how they innovate and operate and how they consistently execute at a high level, day after day. And I would really love it if you could drop us a 5-star review anywhere that you listen to your podcast. That could be Apple, that could be Spotify, could be Google. I'm not picky. Anywhere works, but I really appreciate the support. And as always, I hope you enjoy the show. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
Glad we finally made this happen. I think we had a couple mishaps along the way.
Misconnections, but I got your Craigslist post finally, and here I am.
Oh my God, the misconnections. Did you ever know anybody that actually partook in a Craigslist misconnection?
No, but I used to listen to a podcast where there was like a recurring segment that they would read them aloud, like LA Craigslist market misconnections.
I remember, I know at least one person that I remember she met like her husband via like a misconnection on a subway.
It's incredible.
It's, what's crazy is like, I moved to New York in like, what was it, 99, 2000? And I got my apartment on Craigslist. I was like a basement of this like apartment in Queens, Middle Village, Queens.
Yep.
And never saw the apartment once. Never met the person. Just
so leap of faith.
$500 basement apartment. I feel like that would never happen. But back then that was really the only way was Craigslist.
I know. Also a $500 basement apartment in Queens would never happen anymore.
I worked at Oceana at the time, and it was like an hour and a half to get to work every day. I would have to take a bus to like a train in Bushwick. I don't even know if I think they call it East Williamsburg now, that part of it, Grand Street. And then a train in and then a train up. It was like, but $500 a month. I mean, it was great. It's funny. It's kind of like, I actually liked that apartment and I liked the people that I lived with. And it sort of feels like that arranged marriage thing, like sometimes maybe we overthink all the things we get into. And if you just kind of like do it, it'll work out fine.
Definitely. You were probably at a stage in your career where it was literally just like a place to rest for 6 or 7 hours, and then get back to it.
I mean,
especially with that commute.
Yeah, I was like 19 years old, I think. So I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
In Wilmington.
Oh, you're from Delaware. Well,
I am. Yeah.
What is that like, man? It's such a small state. I can't.
Well, it's been, it had a moment for sure in 2020 around the election, and then felt like all eyes were on Delaware for a second there. I mean, obviously, as of this past week, no longer, but everybody's like a Philly sports fan, and Wilmington is its own kind of like small to medium sized city that has its own identity and like is not a suburb like, towns on the main line are, but like effectively it has some characteristics of being like a Philly suburb, right? Like there are a lot of professional commuters to the city.
Oh, so people live there and then commute to Philly?
For sure, yeah. And vice versa. I mean, my partner Mark in Ipsa, who's a co-owner of Reanimator, like before he started roasting coffee, he was living in Philly and commuting to a job at Chase Bank in Wilmington. So there's the reverse as well, I think especially among the younger crowd that is either in law or finance and works in Wilmington, but kind of wants a big city experience. So there's like a reverse commute dynamic as well.
How far is I imagine it's a train, not a drive, right?
Yeah. I mean, Amtrak is 15 minutes, SEPTA, our Philly's regional rail, like terminates in Wilmington, and that's closer to a half hour, or you can drive in 30 minutes. So
yeah. Do you live in Delaware now, or do you live in Philly?
No, we're back in Philly as of January. So we had a little detour pandemic move to Wilmington that coincided nicely with the Hotel du Pont project opening. But really it was just, we were stir crazy during shelter in place and, with a 3-year-old who no longer had daycare and, kind of like 2-bedroom apartment, wondering if we could find a backyard somewhere. So we like quickly pulled the trigger, I think ahead of some of the like exodus from cities. We had a place under contract by July of 2020. So,
oh, wow.
Technically, we weren't even supposed to look at the home in person, and the agent kind of bent the rules and got us in there. It was just supposed to be virtual tours at that point of homes. So,
That's so funny.
we were there for 3.5 years. Gia, I think the novelty kind of wore off for her within 6 months. And
why? She's missed the city?
Hey, she's like Brooklyn born and raised. And I think, had only ever lived in cities. She had never even had a driver's license until 3 months after we moved there. So anytime she wanted to leave, it was either catching a ride with me or, if it was visiting a client in Philly, it was, $100 45-minute Uber ride. Or if it was, getting to the train, it was like we were pretty removed. I mean, we were on back roads, beautiful setting, but like, even getting to the train was a 25-minute drive. So if she was doing a New York, if she was doing a New York trip, it was like just, a same day trip, like 4 to 5 hours were accounted for just to kind of do the commute, so.
That's nuts. We live in northern Westchester, but we got really lucky because we live in this town called Croton on Hudson, and the train is like 2 minutes from the house, or no, like
Nice.
6 minutes, and it's a direct shot to Grand Central. So it's like 46 minutes to Grand Central, which is great because you could just kind of do work on the train, watch the Hudson River.
Yep.
I do miss living in the city. I go in like once a week or so, but that's definitely different. We moved up long before the pandemic. It was like 2017, which was, man, it's insane how much houses increased in price after 2020.
Hey, good for you. We caught a little bit of that, but yeah, I imagine that's a good situation to be in. We moved back. It's nice to be back. I'm a 5-minute walk from this new project, so that's super helpful. But Fishtown was where I moved when I came up to Philly from having been cooking in DC. I moved directly to Fishtown, and it was kind of at a moment in that neighborhood's trajectory where it was like, people were talking about it, but you kind of be there looking around, like, what are people talking about? Like the people were beginning to be there, and some of those sort of like beachhead, businesses were starting to open, where you're like, okay, this is the first sign. The third wave coffee shop, 3 or 4 times over, Pizzeria Badia, and then it's taken off. It's incredible now. Yeah.
I mean, today we'll talk a lot about your concepts, and also I did want to talk a bit about hotel dining in general. But you did remind me about something. I wanted to ask if you've heard of this premise that's happening now. We're talking about virtual tours of like the houses, but have you seen, there's this company called Tables that Fraser started, really, really, really cool concept. And basically you can just tour the restaurant, pick out your table, or tour a hotel and like, scope all the sort of like rooms if you're going to do an event. Have you seen any of that or use any of that in your restaurants?
No. I mean, the only thing related to, a pitch around like interior content like that has been, repeated offers from Google Maps to kind of like extend the street view into the interior space, which we've declined repeatedly because it's, $2,500 and
that's nuts, dude.
There's plenty of, content of our interior out there for anyone trying to find it. Yeah. I mean, I imagine that. So does it like sync to your reservation platform?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like just incrementally additional revenue because you can scope out the space and pick a table. And basically you're just paying for the table in addition to whatever you pay. I believe this is how it works, and it's free. Yeah. So like they come and like do all the sort of like, video and
imagery.
And then I think they just take a percentage of that like purchase of the table. It's kind of like,
so
buying
it's like a premium economy upgrade.
Yeah. Which I think is smart, because, oftentimes I never really got the whole like, the best table in the restaurant. I know it's a thing, but like, I'm always like, I don't know, whoever I'm with, I'm just like, we're gonna have a good time wherever we are.
I know a bad table when I see or am at one, which is like, proximity to the bathroom in particular. But I don't, to me, I mean, reading American Psycho years ago and there being like discussions about the best table, I'm like, what is the best table? I personally don't want to be seen as much as possible in life. So what's the best table to one person is probably not.
But that's
to
a good
others.
Point too. Yeah. I mean, because look, there's definitely people that want like a very specific table. And also if you have a group, maybe, if there's a choice between a banquette and like a 6-top, rectangle table, maybe you'll like, I definitely want the banquette.
Yeah.
So, or if you're proposing or something, I mean, there's probably a lot of reasons why people would want that actually. Anyways, so I want to talk about form, function, hospitality because I don't, I checked on the website, but obviously you have a bunch of projects going on. Before we get to that, how did you get into cooking? Because I believe you started in a very similar, very different career, which was law.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
you went from law to cooking, is that right?
Yeah, roughly. I mean, with some, time in between that was less, structured or didn't have a clear trajectory. I mean, I moved to DC and kind of had like a little bit of panic, but not like an urgent sense of panic, but just sort of, I'm approaching my mid-20s and what am I doing? And had a lot of friends who were really ambitious kind of personalities and were on these, amazing professional trajectories themselves. And I'm kind of like, what am I doing? Law clearly wasn't for me. I was dating somebody at the time whose family came from a hospitality background. Father was still in it, but they had been with the, Let Us Entertain You group in Chicago before coming out east. And yeah, food was like everything to them. It was often the topic of conversation. It was, a lot of the television that was watched. And so I had like seeds of that, I think, growing up personally. I mean, my sister was obsessed with food. My grandmother was an amazing cook. My mom was a good cook.
Why was your sister obsessed with food?
That's a good question. She just, it was when the Food Network appeared, it was a fixture. I was always kind of wanting to watch MTV and she always wanted to watch Malta Mario and The Essence of Emerald and what was the grill, that Bobby Flay's like grill.
Oh, yeah. Wait, you were watching MTV then. What MTV shows were you watching?
Grilling and chilling. Oh man, like MTV Raps and, if I could like finagle at Headbangers Ball at midnight. I had pretty varied interests in music at that point. But yeah, it's like she was always wanting Food Network and I thought it was great. I mean, I remember that first episode, that like legendary first episode of Malta Mario where he mangles his finger.
So good. I mean, that show was really, really good. And the food on there was just also really good.
I don't know. Like, are we allowed to say that? But yeah, it was.
I mean, two things can be true at once.
Indeed. Yep.
Did you ever watch The Frugal Gourmet? You remember that? It's a little older.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the fat ladies. And I mean, it was like a real, I appreciate the like authenticity and low budgetness of it in that era. It was very much just underproduced in the best way. And, it's obviously gone in different directions now, but I have really fond memories. And that was like, I don't know. I like food was important to me. If you had asked me when I was 15, whether I'd be cooking when I'm 25, I would have told you absolutely not. But yeah, so I moved to DC with a girl who, like I said, her family was super into food and hospitality. And, I was kind of cooking on my own, started going to the farmers markets that Fresh Farm put on down there, various locations. And I saw this guy who kept showing up to all these Fresh Farm markets with this incredible array of like breads. I mean, he would show up with 15 or 20 different kinds of bread, all kinds of beautiful like French pastries. And I asked him if I could help him sell the stuff. And I did that with him for a month or two. And it turned out he was baking, like his bakery was in a converted, like really beautiful barn in the panhandle of West Virginia. And I asked him if I could kind of learn the ropes and like come out and spend some time baking. And he really jumped at the opportunity because, his labor pool out there, like he had a pastry chef who had come to him, this guy, he was from CIA, but was very much just happy, like living on his own on the property out there. But otherwise it was, folks who like, I don't know how to say this diplomatically, but like would not have been baking artisanally, but for Wes just happening to be out there. So Wes was a chef by training, had spent a career, as a chef at the Greenbrier Resort and had fallen into baking, but also had this catering arm on the side. So after like a couple of years being on the bench and working the ovens and mixing dough with him.
You were living out in West Virginia?
No, I was living in DC, which was insane. So I was like, my routine was basically going out there for a couple days at a time and like baking.
Uh-huh.
And then I would like, either drive the truck or catch a ride on the truck into DC, where we would deliver, the big wholesale account was Mom's Organic Market. And then these various, he had like Annapolis, Penn Quarter, DC, the White House Market that launched while I was with him, DuPont Circle. So it was like, the volume was insane. I mean, people were just snapping these $10 loaves up. Like they'd never seen bread before, and he was definitely making money. And it was like, it was cool to see for me, how you can make just a quality, honest product like that and sort of have a creative business model. But he had this catering division sort of on the side where, he had some longstanding relationships with the lobbyists down in DC who would throw, a big like annual party. And there are a few of these. And he would get these like $200,000-$300,000 contracts for single day catering. And they were over the top, and I was like learning techniques from him.
Did he have a background in fine dining as well?
I mean, he literally had spent his career at Greenbrier.
Oh,
and
gotcha.
Hearing his stories about that, I mean, it was an era when those resorts were, it was like fully a brigade system.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a down moment, you were tornaying potatoes. Every line cook had to know how to carve ice.
Yeah.
Like it was very,
Greenbrier was like the go-to externship for culinary schools in like the late 90s, early 2000s.
That's what I came to understand. Yeah. So he had a lot of tricks up his sleeve. He had a lot of experience, and I began to gravitate. I think over time I just got sort of bored shaping breads, and by no means mastered it. Like I was, but I think I needed something with more variation, and I really enjoyed helping him with the catering stuff. So he encouraged me to go to culinary school, and that was the next move for me.
Nice. Where'd you go to school?
It's now defunct, but it was called l'Académie de Cuisine, right outside DC. So, some great like Ketsia, Aaron Silverman, Carla Hall are all graduates, but it was cool because like it was all, the faculty was all super classically trained, like guys from Lyon who had ended up in DC either because they were working at the French embassy or the White House. And it seemed like there was sort of a retirement plan for those guys to just go right into l'Académie de Cuisine. So I remember like there's this guy, Chef, what was his name? Chef Fabrice, I think. He had a pinky, one of his pinkies had like a 1.5-inch fingernail that he would use as a sort of utility tool.
Oh my God. I thought you were going to say his pinky got cut off.
And they would tell stories about like these kitchens in Lyon in the 70s where there would be like knife fights between cooks, and that all appealed to me very much. So,
all right, what's the craziest thing that you've seen in a kitchen and the worst injury you've ever had?
The craziest thing I've seen, well, the worst injury I've seen was Michael Ferreri, who ended up becoming the chef at Res Ipsa. When we were cooking next to each other at Sahav, he pulled a pan out of like a 475 degree oven beneath the French top. And, it had a generous amount of oil.
Oof.
And it splashed all the way up his arm. Like that was pretty gnarly. I don't know. I always get a little bit sick to my stomach when I see people get nicked on mandolins. It's like when it happens, you roll with it. What else are you going to do? But just, I don't know. There's something about seeing it for me at this point that's worse than it actually happening to me. Like when I see it happen to somebody else, it just makes my stomach turn over.
It's so funny. Like I've had a couple bad injuries. One with a deep fryer when I was very young, actually, when I was like 17 or something, with like my whole arm, like just like 3rd-degree fryer burn. And I was like a wrestler. So I had to like wrap my arm in, and whatever, just whatever you call that stuff, to wrestle. And that sucked. But when I was at Tabla, I remember, it's funny because you said that. I remember like it didn't even register for me. I was slicing eggplant on the meat slicer, because we would slice it really thick and then dice like really, really like nice, like just almost like a Macedon, maybe bigger size. And we would slice the eggplant on the meat slicer. And I was singing a song to the dishwasher or a park cook or something. And I just was just slicing, and then boom, thumb totally off, hanging on by like a piece of skin.
Seriously?
And I kept slicing, and then I was like, oh man, I think, fuck.
Oh my God. Well,
everyone was freaking out, and I was like, I wasn't because I don't think I could feel it because I like sliced the nerve and I was just sitting there like kind of like laughing, my thumb just sort of like hanging off by like this piece of skin. And now they're like two different sizes, my thumbs, but it didn't even hit me as like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. I was just, maybe I was in shock, but I was just like laughing all the way to the hospital for them to tie up my thumb.
Yeah, you were definitely in shock.
I mean, those kinds of things never, they never go away. They always
For
stick with you.
sure. And nobody can see you like I can right now, but I think your thumb looks great for what it's worth.
I appreciate that. They are two different sizes now. I mean, this will go on video, but you'll see like, you see one that's like the one is longer than the other. It's like a half inch longer.
Did you say we are on video?
Yeah, we got video too.
Oh, who knew?
It'll be both. Don't worry, you look good.
I'll stop sipping my coffee then. Okay.
I've been, all over it. It's okay. We're real people. We do real things. So injuries. What's like the craziest thing you've seen, independent of like an injury in a restaurant, or experienced? Or
I had a dishwasher who like threw me against the wall with his arms around my neck one time, who worked for me, who was my employee.
Oof. Why?
And to be honest, I don't even remember why. Like, I'm positive that it was nothing that was proportionate to that happening, just kind of a volatile personality. I mean, I've seen, someone else walked out on me mid-shift after saying, I don't feel like being here anymore. I need to go get the heroin. Stuff like that. I mean, it's not funny, but yeah, just things that are, would be unthinkable in a conventional workplace, maybe you would say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a few of those too. I remember one time, this was in 2001. It was before 9/11, I think. And one of our dishwashers, we had, on the night shift at Oceana, we wouldn't get done till like 3 a.m. after cleanup and everything. And this dishwasher came to the back door. It was his day off, but he came to the back door with a sex worker and someone who worked with her. And basically they were just like, he needs to pay us. And we all had to sort of chip in and give him money, which obviously we're all poor too.
Wow.
At like 2 a.m.
Uh-huh.
That was a nutty one. I have another story with a pig, but I won't share that one here. Anyways.
That's wild.
All right, let's talk about form function.
I have one other good one, actually. No, never mind.
Are you sure?
Leave that one on the table. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good on that.
How about just a clue for people so that when they see you on the street, they're like, you got to tell me this story.
It involved a team of kitchen management at a restaurant where I worked, staying in the kitchen in the restaurant with the lights off overnight with like self-fashioned spears to eliminate a rodent that had been spotted in the restaurant that day. And they got it.
Wow.
In like the most savage manner you can imagine.
That's just impressive. All right. We could probably do this for a long time, but let's talk about form function. So can you just pretend I know nothing about it? What is the group and what are you guys doing?
So at this point, like it's a constellation of people I work with on the design side, culinary ops, but kind of what we offer is the ability to develop concepts and manage critical paths related to everything that goes into an opening and begin to develop a specialty in the space of kind of properties that are very design intensive and where there are historical either constraints or considerations. So if there is a need for design that adheres to certain limitations when it comes to the exterior or interior because of historic designations on the property, and then some of the, tax incentives that accompany those projects. But, where there are sensitivities around, maybe what this property used to be or how it fits into a community or, wholesale sort of reconcepting something that has a historical reputation. So these are things that I love these projects. I find those complications to be really interesting and like intellectually challenging in the best way. But in general terms, like I'm working with hotel operators and developers to develop concepts that complement their properties, but also have like a true sense of identity themselves and, can stand alone and present as an authentic independent restaurant and embody that spirit, even if it's part of like some larger thesis that group might have around, a neighborhood or a specific property. Yeah. So I've learned a lot as I've veered into this territory of, not solely owning and operating. Actually really, really like the challenges that it presents. And, so that's where we're at. But I think, we have some projects in the works right now. I do some of my work under the form function framework, on more of a like a la carte basis that isn't a holistic development of a concept kind of from the very beginning, but we can come in and troubleshoot something that's already running or just kind of own a specific part of a critical path if there are other parties sort of already at the table handling the branding, handling, whatever else. And, often I'm doing this stuff without my name attached to it, so kind of selective about where I'm actually saying that this is my place. And
which makes sense. I mean, first of all, they're beautiful properties, but it sounds like you're sort of doing your best to like assimilate the concept to wherever it is and whatever the environment is and the space. And so, which by the way, sounds really fun, right? You're just creating food and concepts around the architecture and space and the area, as opposed to like, I'm Tyler and I want to create this kind of food and here's where it is and let's go find a space. Yeah.
Yeah. Which like has its own, that's rewarding. And I've done that. And there's a purity to that it definitely has an appeal. And I think that, sometimes I find restaurants like that maybe resonate slightly more strongly, but it's, the world has different needs at times. And I found that this is a lane that I'm comfortable being in.
This show is brought to you by, you guessed it, Mies. Mies helps thousands of restaurants and food service businesses all over the world build profitable menus and scale their business successfully. If you're looking to organize your recipe IP and train your team to put out consistent product every day in less time than ever before, then Mies is just for you. And you can transform all those old Google Docs and Word docs and PDFs and spreadsheets and Google Sheets into dynamic, actionable recipes in Mies in lightning speed. Plus, stop all that manual work of processing invoices because Mies will digitize all your purchases automatically. And there's a built-in database of ingredient yields, prep yields, and unit of measure conversions for every ingredient, which means you're going to get laser-accurate food costs in a fraction of the time. Visit www.getmeez.com. That's GETMEEZ.com to learn more. And check out the show notes moving forward because we're going to be adding promotions and discount codes so that all of you lovely and brilliant Mies podcast listeners get a sweet deal on Mies. Yeah, it's funny because I feel like there's been this sort of bell curve of hotel restaurants that were like some really amazing ones. And then for a while, just a lot of really shitty hotel restaurants. And now it's kind of like coming back around where there's a lot more good food in restaurants, which is awesome to see. I don't know if you only work in hotels or if it's just, is that, at least for form function, is that specifically with hotel spaces or is it any kind of?
No, so like I said, like I do white label kind of consulting, even in independent restaurants. But besides hotels, the other primary like partners that I'm working with are developers, where it might be part of renovating, reconcepting a specific building or a collection of buildings in a corner of a neighborhood that's kind of creating a new identity for that part of the neighborhood. So, but typically like institutional partnerships that I'm jumping in with.
Yeah. What is the team like that you work with for that? Like, do you have an internal team that you use for a lot of this? Or?
Yeah. So right now, I mean, it's all on a W-9 basis, right? So I have contractors, and based on what the needs are for a specific project, I'll kind of scope the support that I need to execute. My goal over the next couple of years is to build out a full-time team to execute these projects. I think that when what I have in the pipeline comes to fruition, I'll be in a position to have 3 or 4 people by my side full time.
Yeah. And what are the most common sort of roles that you're bringing on as contractors? Is designers? Is it like compliance? Like what are these types of roles that are typically like most commonly being?
Design, branding, culinary direction, culinary consulting, in that case, sort of people who I'm comfortable with, like being my proxy at times if there's a need to be in two places at once, or who have an expertise in that specific cuisine that I might not have. But yeah, interior design, architectural design, some legal, and especially branding and graphic for sure. Yeah.
Very cool. So I wanted to learn a bit more about the Hotel du Pont and the project here there. Cavalier, is that right?
Yep.
The Cavalier. What's the history of that place and how did you get involved there?
So the history is, this is a hotel that was built by the DuPont company in an era when, a chemical company might, or a gunpowder company really at the time might, want to build a kind of over the top luxury hotel. Like their goal, the DuPont family it was like the first leverage buyout where they took the publicly floated DuPont company private again. And the very beginning of the 20th century, there were three brothers who made like gobs of money in the process. And one of them operated with John Raskob as like his proxy. So the Raskob, the builder of the Empire State Building, he was like really a DuPont proxy throughout his career. It's who they installed on the General Motors board when DuPont had control. So John Raskob and one of the DuPont brothers had this idea to build a hotel in Wilmington that would, be competitive in terms of like aesthetics and experience against, the major hotels in London, New York, and Paris at the time. So hundreds of artisans from France and Italy came over to do plaster work and, gilding details and frescoes and, painting and all. I mean, it's just like truly over the top, like true Gilded Age property. So the Green Room was the restaurant that opened in the Hotel du Pont when the hotel opened in 1913 and operated continuously until its closure in 2020 when it underwent some minor demolition and a lot of conservation and a little bit of construction for our reconcepting project. People in the community have a specific memory of the Green Room depending on when, they experienced it or when they choose to remember it by. But it really Hagley, which is the Hagley Museum was the first powder works for the DuPont company that they built around 1800. And now it's like it has a library of American corporate history. So all of the Hotel DuPont archives live there, and most of the DuPont company archives live there, and went in and spent a lot of time looking at old menus and stuff. And it was like so many different things over the years. It was regional mid-Atlantic cuisine. It was kind of Mad Men era, mid-century cuisine. It was, there was an era where all of the senior management came from Switzerland and it was super classical and the menus were very understated, but just straight out of Escoffier type stuff. So it really was not like a static concept, but it was always very well regarded. It was sort of an institution in the region, before like the Lebec Fens of the world, even. It was one of those real kind of like bulwarks of excellence.
Sounds like a very, very cool concept to then take over and run with.
Yeah, it had, by the time I began to, be engaged on that project, like it had seen better days for sure. The dining room itself was like, it was tired and, the design didn't really speak to our sensibilities. The food felt a bit dated, I would say, and, it needed work. The revenue was like, this is like a very large restaurant, 40-foot ceilings and incredible, decor that you couldn't reproduce if you had all the money in the world today. But despite all that, it was grossing less revenue than Res Ipsa was with 24 seats and no liquor license.
That's nuts.
So yeah, it needed work for sure.
Was the hotel at full capacity?
So there's always been a swift business in banquets there because one of their big assets is the Gold Ballroom, which is just a really unique, incredible space. So pretty constant flow of weddings, and the banquet sort of F&B division has always been a bustling one and thrives. But
Do you also manage the banquets and room service?
no.
So where does it? That's just like a completely separate kitchen, or?
Room service comes out of our kitchen. I mean, the kitchen, next time you're in Delaware, I'd love to show it to you because it's a labyrinth. And, the basement is sort of where banquets operates out of. And we have some storage down there too. But it's just, it's like endless. I mean, we've mothballed 12 of the 16 walk-in refrigerators that were sort of barely hanging on by the time I get in there. But there was this dynamic where, a DuPont family heir or heiress was like getting married, and the last one that was hosted there was 1,000 people, but she's going to have 2,000 people. So they would just add another kitchen and they'd add 2 more walk-ins for that event.
That's nuts.
It was kind of like the company was, because it was privately held for that time, it was like the hotel property was sort of, it was like, a piggy bank kind of asset for the family.
So do they just operate completely separate from your team? How does that work?
Banquets?
Yeah. And is that, how does it, like, ordering and things like that work?
Separate, I mean, we submit separate invoices to Chef's Warehouse and Beldor, and, they come on different pallets, and, the receiving team kind of helps manage that flow.
Oh, yeah, separate walk-ins too, right? So.
Separate walk-ins, yeah. Unless one of them's down, and then they're not separate, which is fun.
Yeah.
And that's one of the, it's an old facility. So there are a lot of facilities challenges there. Mm-hmm. You can't really take a property like that down to the studs, So even though like new ownership came in that I'm partnered with, they bought it from the DuPont company in 2017 or so, there are certain things you can't change. Like the condensers for the walk-ins are 13 stories above them on the roof. And it can be hard at times. There are some challenges there.
So you're a partner in the restaurant. Is it a completely separate entity?
Yeah, it is its own entity, but like the P&L from the restaurant does flow into the hotel P&L. Yeah.
I mean, it's a gorgeous space. I should take my wife down there, just like with the little trip. I love like those beautiful like hotel spaces. Like one of my favorite places to have a drink when I go is the Connaught in London.
Nice. Yeah.
Just like that feeling. And especially if the food matches and the cocktails match the space.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Sounds like you do too. And you have some other projects. What are the other ones that you have both under Form Function or just other things that you're excited about right now?
Gotcha. So we're opening Bastia Restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
And Caletta in Hotel Anna and Bell, which is kind of in the heart of the Fishtown neighborhood in Philly. Similarly, at a historic property, this is a building that has a history dating to the 18th century as a women's asylum.
Wow.
So you'd think this term would be politically incorrect when you hear it, I guess, but it seems like it's used widely. It was a home for indigent women and, functioned in that capacity continuously until the last 10 years when it became a kind of more generalized like retirement home for both men and women. But the current ownership, bought the property early in the pandemic and, started putting plans together to convert it to a hotel. So I've been working on this in one way or another for the better part of 2 years now. So it's pretty exciting that we're about 3 weeks out from that opening. At the moment, not when you all hear this, we'll have been open.
What are so can you talk about those two concepts, how they sort of interface with the hotel?
Yeah. So the hotel, I mean, just starting with the hotel, a lot of the design reference points were the, great boutique hotels of New Orleans. Like there is a lot of looks towards Maison de la Luz and Hotel Peter and Paul and St. Vincent and the Chloe and spots like that. I think like there's something really special about the boutique hotel ecosystem down in New Orleans that like, getting to run around there with Gia as often as I do, I'm lucky to have like experienced. I don't know another city quite like New Orleans where there's like that critical mass of just really unique, well done boutique hotel properties. So Anna and Bell is meant to feel kind of like transportive, like an old world kind of experience, and, a lot of Mediterranean references in the design. I mean, I that's what I latched onto when I started working on this project. And it felt to me like it would be a good opportunity to kind of fuse a couple threads in my background, one being, the like Sicilian concept that we did at Ipsa, and the French stuff I've been doing at Le Cave, and it's really started looking at the islands of Corsica and Sardinia as, somewhere to hang our hat and be able to like play in both of those sandboxes in a way that felt, unique, and not just like, coastal French Italian, which has been done many times over at this point. And some of them are great for sure. But, I wanted to get off the beaten path a little bit. And Corsican food is something that I had begun to deep dive on, as I was like chasing down threads of inspiration at Le Cave. We had a dinner, like a collab dinner tentatively planned with John Seibert, the chef owner of Tail Up Goat in DC. And we were kind of, it ended up falling through for scheduling reasons, but we were going to do a Corsican dinner. And I was like really getting into it at that point. This was a couple of years ago. So it just felt like, these like sources of inspiration coming together for me that kind of matched the vibe that the property was going for. So that's sort of where we're going. I see ways that we can sort of lean Sardinian in the spring and summer, and Corsican in the fall and winter, where the food is a little heartier and it's almost like alpine in some ways because of the island's history.
Yeah. Did you spend any time in Corsica?
Yeah, I spent about a week in each, to my wife's chagrin, like on the eve of moving up to Philly.
Gia didn't get to make it out there?
No, this is her birthday gift to me, actually. My
Wow.
40th birthday gift was some time away from the kids and, an airfare to and from Corsica, which is where I started, and rented a car and ended up like putting on a ferry to Sardinia. It's been about a week in each, and was really, really amazing. Can't wait to get back there. I mean, there's a lot more for me to explore, but I'm really like enjoying immersing myself in these two cuisines.
What do you love most about the Corsican cuisine?
I think what I like about it's so counterintuitive. You look at a map and it's sitting in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's like, you kind of like draw a right triangle, and it's like, you have, Rome and Marseille roughly, and it's there, and it's, you're okay. So this must be kind of bright, what we think of as sort of Mediterranean, like, bright and light. And that would be the assumption, and maybe there's a little bit of French influence there by virtue of its, its political status. But, in reality, it's a super rugged country. You have, despite its small size, like quickly as you get into the interior, you're up in mountains that are taller than any mountains we have in the continental US.
Wow.
And because there was such a malaria problem there for a very long time, really until the second half of the 20th century, most of the people lived in the interior, either in the hills or the mountains. So, you have these like sheep's milk cheeses, and cheese generally resembles more like inland, alpine, continental traditions. You've got, more pork than fish for sure. You've got more veal as a beloved item, and charcuterie, and a lot of these things that we associate more with like less kind of coastal cuisine. And I wanted to find a way to thread that needle and be able to serve seasonal menus, but have it feel like we're not like trying to pigeonhole butternut squash into a like breezy Mediterranean framework. To me, I think that is going to be our cadence, is like really leaning more in that direction in the cooler months of the year, with that kind of produce and those kind of animal products, versus spring, summer, being able to look a little, across the water to Sardinia and kind of playing with those flavors more.
I always remember chestnuts being a big part of the agriculture in Corsica.
Huge.
I was reading this thing about Corsica, which is interesting because there's been a lot of different cultures that have come through there. When Genoa was sort of like migrating there, the governor mandated that every every resident plant one chestnut tree, one mulberry tree, an olive tree, and a fig tree. And you got fined.
That's right. Yeah.
If you did not plant one of each of those a year.
Yep.
So it definitely sounds like very, very plant-based. Very cool culture. Are you using a lot of chestnuts?
In the fall and winter, we will be. Like, we have an old fashioned that incorporates chestnuts on the beverage menu for opening.
How do you do that? That sounds interesting.
We're going to crack them and infuse them, So honestly, we're still kind of like R&Ding the beverage, but there happens to be a chestnut farm here. It's just like an ex-Google guy, Bloom Farm, who bought an estate in Pennsylvania, and he's been hosting some guest chefs from around Philly to do dinners out there. But, really trying to like revive the American chestnut tree, which was eliminated.
Yeah.
Effectively, like the American chestnut tree used to be the most ubiquitous like tree in continental North America.
I didn't know that. Wow.
And it disappeared entirely.
We have two of them in our front yard. I mean, the chestnuts are delicious.
Are you sure it's not a Chinese?
They're Chinese chestnuts. I mean, they're delicious, but
yeah. But I think most people, like chestnut connoisseurs, do consider the Chinese chestnut to be inferior. And because it's novel that there is this kind of attempt to resuscitate the chestnut tree kind of right around the time in Pennsylvania, right around the time that we're trying to jump in and explore Corsican food. So I'm excited to work with that farm and serve their stuff. So
it's a great product because, it can have like this sort of starchiness to it. You puree it, but also you can sort of slice it thin. I love like those, like even just buying like the peeled frozen chestnuts, if it's a really good product, is such a great, they work really well with like brandy and caramel and things like that.
For sure.
Because most times when you think of chestnuts in Italy, all you think of is like that chestnut, polenta with ricotta or something, or is it ricotta that they use for that? I don't remember.
They do that chestnut polenta. It's a huge thing in Corsica. It's called polenta, and they, essentially it's hydrated chestnut flour, but you can set it much like corn polenta and then kind of sear it or fry it. And we're planning on doing like a French toast sort of play with that product on our brunch menu.
That sounds really good. Cool. So you got this project in Fishtown and the Pont. Anything else sort of in the pipe or that you're excited about?
The two things that I'm working on intensively that'll be kind of quote unquote like Tyler Akin restaurants, as opposed to things that I do, for folks on a running basis and in more of a consulting or support capacity, are things that I'm not supposed to talk about quite yet. But, one of them involves like really amazing mi brasa grill setup, like, live, cooking over live fire. So
in Philly,
that one's in Wilmington. And then working on a couple of things up here in Philly too, that are maybe closer to 2 years out from here.
Amazing, man. Well, it sounds like you got a lot of stuff going on.
A little bit, but right now I'm like, I try to give my attention fairly and evenly and as generously as possible. And like, we need to get this restaurant open, and that's obviously a huge focus. But we just had a great new chef de cuisine, Stephen Forte, start down in Wilmington. So working with him to, kind of make the transition into that role. And, while making this opening push up here in Philly. But yeah, so I'm on the road a lot, like more than I'd like at times. But I think that's going to be the dynamic of my life for a little bit,
Yep.
I really want to do something in DC, by the way. Like, I miss DC. I love DC's restaurant culture. And, if anybody's listening and they want to do a restaurant in DC, I'm here for it.
DC folks. Very cool, man. Well, this was fun. I'm glad we finally got some time to do it. I will come to Philly soon. Actually, my wife and I are planning like a little like Friday into Saturday, like without the kids getaway.
Please. So we've got a pool at Anna and Bell.
What? Actually, I was talking to Jesse Ito last week. He was we did a recording, and he recommended the Four Seasons. We're trying to think about where we should stay because we want to kind of do it up and just have some fun. So I'll check that one out.
Come check us out. Yeah, the rooms open August 7th. And we've been taking bookings on the hotel side for about a month now. So yeah, come stay. Check us out.
Cool. Yeah, I will definitely keep you posted. And I definitely want to see the Hotel du Pont. It just sounds like such a cool space. So that's it. Thank you. Glad we finally made this happen. And by the way, I didn't get to ask you, but do you another dog? Are you guys like?
So to listeners, we had to reschedule this because my beloved 3-legged pit bull Uni passed the week of our originally scheduled recording. I've always wanted a boxer. Gia is not thrilled about that. So, and it's under negotiation.
Yes, I know how that goes.
Yeah.
I'm an English bulldog guy myself. We have another bulldog, a 7-year-old named Herbie, and my wife really wants a Bernese Mountain Dog. So. That's
a departure. Like that, I love that group. You know, the pit bulls, the bulldogs, the boxer. I don't know. There's something about that.
Just the squishy face.
I know. It is. I was trying to avoid saying it, but it is a squishy face. Yeah.
Yeah. Just cute. Well, I hope you guys figure that out soon.
Thanks.
And, we'll catch up again pretty soon. Thanks for tuning into the Mies podcast. The music from the show is a remix of the song Art Mirror by an old friend, hip-hop artist, Fresh Daily. For show notes and more, visit getmees.com/podcast. That's GETMEEZ.com/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you can share it with fellow entrepreneurs and culinary pros, and give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep innovating, don't settle, make today a little bit better than yesterday, and remember, it's impossible for us to learn what we think we already know. See you next time.